आज की डिस्कशन रिसर्च डिज़ाइन के हवाले से है। ये रिसर्च डिज़ाइन स्पेसिफ़िकली फॉर क्वालिटेटिव रिसर्च के लिए है और क्वालिटेटिव रिसर्च में हमारा फोकस जो है वो केस स्टडी पर है। तो रिसर्च डिज़ाइन की अगर बात करें तो आप ये कह सकते हैं कि एवरी एम्पिरिकल स्टडी हैज़ a plan of data collection, whether that plan is implicit or explicit, but I think in most of the cases it is explicit kind of a plan which we try to find out. We see that this research design is a logical kind of a step which makes the connection of the data which is collected in the light of the initial questions, and then these data are connected with the, let's say, answers to those questions and reaching some kind of conclusions. So the research design is an important kind of step where we see that how the data which is to be collected, or what kind of data which is to be collected is connected with the questions which were formulated initially, and how the results are to be interpreted, and then how these results can lead to certain conclusions and certain recommendations as well. तो एक लिहाज से आप ये कह लें कि रिसर्च डिज़ाइन इज़ समथिंग विच makes us move from here to there. एक स्टेप से, एक जगह से दूसरी जगह तक हमें जो जाना है या उसका जो प्रोसीजर है या वो स्टेप्स हैं, आई थिंक दैट्स व्हाट रिसर्च डिज़ाइन इम्प्लाइज. तो इसको अगर मैं इस तरह से पढ़ूं तो ये बात बनती है कि रिसर्च डिज़ाइन इज़ ए लॉजिकल प्लान for getting from here to there, where here may be defined as the initial set of questions to be answered, and there is some set of conclusions or answer to those questions which were formulated over there. So between here and there may be found a number of steps, including the collection and analysis of relevant data. So here implies okay, what do we want to do? So what are the questions to which we want to find an answer? Those questions are explained, let's say elaborated. The variables are located, maybe variables are defined, and sometimes these are operationalized, and then instruments are developed. And then we see that from here we have a very important step in between, that is the collection of the data. So that plan of the collection of data is actually research design. And इस research design में बहुत सारे steps आ सकते हैं, और जितने steps हैं हर step के पीछे rationale है, क्योंकि ये steps हैं, आप कह लें these are the logical steps, and इन steps को follow करेंगे, then we could collect the information, the relevant information, and that information is trying to help us to reach the destination from here to there, and that destination is to find answers to the questions formulated earlier, and not only answer to those questions, rather maybe developing some kind of generalizations if possible, some kind of theoretical models if possible, and some kind of predictions if it is possible. So that is from here to there. Here is the initial stage. Here is what you talk about the objectives of this study. Here includes the questions to which we want to find an answer. The objectives can stipulate that we want to find an answer to question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, or This could also be, if it is not a question, this could also be a proposition. We would like to find whether or not this proposition is true, or you could say testing of this particular proposition, and then how that is to be tested, what kind of data are to be collected, what kind of instruments are to be used, what is the rationale for that instrument, what is the rationale for asking a particular question which is part of that instrument, whether that's the questionnaire or interview schedule or interview guide, or what kind of observations are to be made. I think every step or every item which is part of this research design has a logical kind of justification. It has an argumentation, and this is how we collect the data, how we process the data, how do we analyze the data, and as a result of that analysis, how do we reach certain conclusions. I think that's broadly speaking what research design implies. It deals with at least 4 problems, and those problems are, I think I have already talked about these, but specifically these problems could be what questions to study, what data are relevant, what data to collect, and how to analyze the results. The 4 things. So what are the questions, what data to be collected, what data are relevant, and then how to do the analysis. I think these are the broad areas of research design. Now these broad areas could be different, let's say, in quantitative research compared with qualitative research, but certainly I would say there is a lot of overlapping, and we also see that there is a lot of triangulation where we do not, let's say, confine ourselves to one method of data collection and analysis. We might be using more than one method of data collection so that the quality of work is improved, so that the results are more dependable, more reliable, so that we could make some, let's say, predictions about the situation which has been studied, so that these studies, the results of the study could be made use of, let's say, as part of the applied research. I have listed over here 5 components of research design for case studies. Now, these components I just read. One is studies questions, 2 its propositions if there are any, 3 its unit or units of analysis, logic linking the data to the propositions, and 5th is the criteria for interpreting the findings. Now we talk about the study questions. The form of the questions in terms of who, what, where, how and why provides an important clue regarding the most relevant research method to be used. So research questions actually demarcate the boundaries with respect to what kind of data are we looking for. Quantitative data, the qualitative data, from where that is to be collected, when that is to be collected, and how that data are to be used in order to answer those particular questions. I think it's very important. Obviously, we cannot do research unless we have something to question, something to a question to which we want to find an answer. So some queries, some kind of inquisitiveness, something which agitates the mind of a person, if it is a pure kind of research, or if it is an applied, then obviously we are having an undesirable situation, and we want to find out the reasons for that undesirable situation. So what are the questions which are to be answered? I think this is the basic foundation of any research study, and that foundation actually helps us in what kind of research design we are going to have. So we have to first of all find out, locate what are the questions to which we want to find an answer, and those questions draw the boundaries or the limits with respect to the kind of data we are looking for and from where that data is to be retrieved. The case study method is most likely to be appropriate for how and why questions. So initial task is to clarify precisely the nature of study questions that formulate the research questions to be answered. Naming of these questions or propositions clarifies the boundaries of the case study with regard to the time period covered by the case study, the relevant social group, organization, or the geographic area, the type of evidence to be collected, and the priorities for data collection and analysis. I think that's very essential, that if we have the questions, in the questions there are the let's say pillar posts for the demarcation of the boundaries of the research design. Data कहाँ से लेना है, कब लेना है, किस किस्म का डेटा लेना है, who will provide that information, who would be the respondents. इन सब चीज़ों को सामने रखकर I think it's very essential that the research design is formulated in the light of those research questions. So that is important. What are those questions? These questions include the variables on which the information is to be collected. These questions tell us who are going to be the respondents. Variables, respondents. Then the location of those respondents, the geographical location of those respondents. This is an organization located in a particular geographical area, or a particular locality where we have an issue or a problem, a city or rural area, or a particular locality, mohalla of a particular city. तो ये क्वेश्चंस हमें बताते हैं कि किन वेरिएबल्स पे इंफॉर्मेशन कलेक्ट करनी है, ये बताते हैं कि ये इंफॉर्मेशन किन से हासिल करनी है, हु आर गोइंग टू बी द रिस्पोंडेंट्स. अब रिस्पोंडेंट की बात कर रहे हैं तो केस स्टडी के हवाले से ये क्वेश्चंस बताएंगे कि हमारा केस क्या होगा, हमारा यूनिट ऑफ एनालिसिस क्या होगा. एक यूनिट होगा, एक से ज़्यादा यूनिट्स होंगे, एक यूनिट के अंदर बहुत सारे यूनिट्स एम्बेडेड होंगे, या क्या होगा. सो वेरिएबल आ गया, हमारा रिस्पोंडेंट आ गया. फिर हम ये बात कर रहे हैं कि वो जो यूनिट है या केस है, वेयर इज़ दैट लोकेटेड. तो उसकी जोग्राफिकल लोकेशन की बात भी हम कर रहे हैं. और उसके बाद हम टेम्पोरल सिचुएशन की बात कर रहे हैं कि कब की बात है, ये किस वक्त विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द टाइम व्हेन वी वांट टू हैव दिस. एंड देन ऑब्वियसली these questions are going to tell us the background, the context within which this whole data or information is to be collected. I think this is the first step and very important step that we, when we are trying to develop our research design, we keep the questions in mind. If the questions have not been formulated, I think we should have the questions right in the beginning. अब क्वेश्चंस हो सकते हैं, ऑब्जेक्टिव्स भी हो सकते हैं, कोई ज़रूरी नहीं है ऑब्जेक्टिव्स क्वेश्चंस की फॉर्म में हों, बट सर्टेनली these statements which are part of the objectives could be in the form of questions, contain the basic requirement on which the research design has to be developed, on which, as I said earlier, these questions tell us from where we have to move. How to move, that's a part of the research design. But what is the starting point? What is the we are going to aim at? हमने जाना कहाँ है? ये questions actually are telling us something about the goal, and if we know the goals, then perhaps we can find the way, the road to which leads to that, to those goals. But if we don't have the questions, if we don't have the goals, then perhaps we might be wandering around in the wilderness. We will not be able to reach any place. So that is the significance of these questions for the research design. From questions, we can talk about the propositions. Each proposition directs attention to something that should be examined with the scope of the study. For instance, assume that your research on the topic of interorganizational partnership began with the following question: how and why do organizations collaborate with one another to provide joint services? For example, for manufacturer and a retail outlet collaborating to sell certain computer products. Now, these how and why questions, capturing what you are really interested in answering, can lead to the case study as the appropriate method of the first place. So, as I said earlier, I repeat that if we have the question that how something works, then we could logically say that, find out that how it works. If we have the question, what it is, what is the issue, logically or theoretically, can we find out the answer to that as well? Because that issue might not necessarily be the first appearance in the circumstances or in the environment. Similar issues may have emerged earlier too. If we are talking about the collaboration between the organizations, this may not be a new thing. This might be an old kind of, let's say, practice, but how in the past organizations have been collaborating, and then how these could be collaborating now, what innovations can be introduced in these particular collaborating approaches. So the idea is that if we have a question, what could be the possible theoretical answer to that question? If we can find a theoretical answer to that question, obviously when I say theoretical answer, I'm talking about the logical answer. Logical answer means an answer which is supported by the personal experiences, supported by the evidence which people can, or the researcher can get from the review of literature. And I think, as you know, that the review of literature is very, very important in any research. Any researcher who is trying to start any study has to take stock of the situation, see what the previous researchers have done in this particular field. इस रिव्यू ऑफ लिटरेचर में ज़रूरी नहीं है कि चूँकि ये केस स्टडी की बात हो रही है कि हम सिर्फ वही रिव्यू करें या उन्हीं पास्ट केस स्टडीज़ को पढ़ें, बल्कि इसके अलावा अगर एम्पिरिकल स्टडीज़ में कोई सर्वेज़ की बात है या लेट्स से डेटा किसी और टेक्निक से कलेक्ट किया गया है, आई थिंक those are equally relevant. So our researcher, good researcher, tries to do a comprehensive review of literature. और उस literature में he tries to find an answer to these particular questions. Not only to these particular questions, बल्कि इस review में उसको ये भी पता चलता है कि इससे पहले दूसरे रिसर्चर्स ने अगर इसी किस्म की कोई स्टडी की है तो उन्होंने कौन सा रिसर्च डिज़ाइन यूज़ किया है, उन्होंने ये डेटा कैसे कलेक्ट किया, उन्होंने इस क्वेश्चंस में जो वेरिएबल नज़र आ रहे हैं जिनके ऊपर ये डेटा कलेक्ट करना है, उनको उन्होंने कैसे डिफाइन किया। नॉट ओनली डिफाइन किया थ्योरेटिकली, बल्कि ऑपरेशनली उन्होंने उसको कैसे डिफाइन किया, उन्होंने उसको कैसे मेजर किया। तो रिव्यू ऑफ लिटरेचर इज़ very essential, not only to make the researcher wiser with respect to a particular issue under study, it provides us many things, ready-made kind of research designs, ready-made kind of, let's say, measures for measuring a particular concept or a variable. And then we also find theories in this review of literature. So what I am trying to focus here at is that if we have a question, what could be the possible theoretical answer to that question? Now, if we have the possible theoretical answers, then can we connect these questions with the answers? If we can connect these two, this is more like giving a theoretical answer or proposing a particular solution, proposing an answer to the question which is being formulated. That is why we call it as a proposition. And this proposition actually tells us that how the two factors are related with each other. If the question has the problem, okay, what could be its root cause? Now, theoretical proposition might propose, okay, this could be the root cause of this one. So that is how the propositions are very essential. If we make it, I think things become more clear. We have specific kind of, let's say, specific kind of variables on which the information has to be collected. It will help us in specifying the kind of information to be collected. It will help us in further identifying the subjects from whom the information is to be collected. It can further specify the boundaries, the time, the location, and it can further help us later on how to connect the data with the questions which we formulated earlier. So the second step in this research design for case studies is the formulation of the looking into the propositions, if these have been already formulated, if these are not formulated. Still, if we have the questions, okay, what could be the possible answers, so that keeping in view the variables which are part of the answers, we could plan the instruments and for the data collection. We can plan with respect to the subjects from whom the data are to be collected. So proposed answer to the questions are actually helpful in the formulation of the propositions, and these propositions help us in delimiting the boundaries of the case and tell us how do we collect the data. The third item which we have to look into is the unit of analysis, or you could say the unit as a case on which we want to do research. Now that unit could be one unit, one case, that could be number of cases, that could be one big let's say unit or big case, and within that there could be smaller units which are embedded in it, just like a big organization, and within that organization it might be having different departments, and each department may be considered as a sub unit of the bigger unit, and maybe comparisons are made, or on the basis of the study of each sub unit which is embedded in the bigger one, we reach certain conclusions. So with respect to the unit, I may say that a case may be an individual, just like a juvenile delinquent, drug addict, a clinical patient, could be top class student, could be certain type of leaders. The individual is the primary unit of analysis in this particular situation. So questions and propositions set boundaries to the information collected. So case can be a group, a locality, an organization, a decision program, implementation process, and organizational change. So that actually, when we talk about the unit, the initial questions to which we had earlier discussion, they actually help us in the delimitation of the boundaries of our unit. So whether this unit is an individual person, as I said, could be a leader, and then we could talk about number of leaders, or we are talking about the leadership of qualities of those leaders. It could be a drug addict as a clinical kind of case. It could be juvenile delinquent. We are trying to take it as a case and try to figure out the factors which might be leading to the deviant behavior of this individual. It could be a group living in a particular area. It could be a group of workers who might be having a small group in the bigger organization, and that could also be part of the, let's say, decision-making process. That could be a group which can influence with respect to the mobilization of the workers for increasing the motivation, for increasing the productivity. So the unit of analysis or the case is our third important step in our research design. So we have to decide what is our case. So we have to lay down the boundaries of this case. Case or number of cases. Boundaries with respect to the physical boundaries, with respect to non-physical, with respect to the area of influence of that group. It depends again on the questions to which we want to find an answer. Also, it tells us about the time situation. It can also tell us about the background or the context in which we have to do this study. So the third important step is the decision about the case. And again, I would repeat, when we are deciding about the case, we don't forget about the accessibility of that case. When I say accessibility, I mean how much in-depth can we go. If we are doing the in-depth analysis, will the unit, will the case, will the organization be helpful in providing us or letting us have an access to sources of data? Those sources of data could be the documents of the organization. Those sources of data could be the management of the organization. Those sources of data could be the workers who are working in that organization. Now, will management allow the researchers to have an in-depth, let's say, interview with the workers, whether during the working hours or later on? So how much access we can have? So since we want to have an in-depth analysis, we want to have an in-depth access to the subjects as well. Subjects or the, let me use the word, to the case or the cases or the units of analysis. There is a need for spatial, temporal, and other concrete boundaries of the case. I have already talked about these things. So desired case should be some real-life phenomenon. To justify using the case study method, you need to define a specific real-life case to represent the abstraction. So give an operational definition, get help from the literature. I think that's something about which I referred to earlier. So whatever we are doing, we have to define it. Now, this is very important. This definition is very important in the sense that the reader and the writer are on the same wavelength. Not only for the present writer, it could also be not only for the present reader, but also for the future researchers. Because one criticism of the qualitative researchers is that it is difficult to verify these kind of studies. It is difficult to replicate, for example. So that's an issue of validity. Now, if we are trying to validate something, so let's try to put down everything in black and white, so that if anybody wants to replicate, try this again, should follow the same steps, and then likely to, let's say, verify it. So operationalization means telling the reader how the researcher is going to measure a particular variable. Not only how is he going to measure it, he has to specify the indicators of that particular variable, and then also spell out, keeping in view those indicators, what will be the procedure, the instruments for collecting that information. Now, that is very important, and all this is possible when we take into consideration the first step, that is the questions which have been formulated as part of the objectives of this study. So unit of analysis has to be selected, keeping in view that what are the questions to be asked, from whom these are to be asked, how deep we have to go, and in fact the questions lay down the boundaries within which this case is to be studied. And in a different way, I would say that when I said it's a bounded system, case study is a bounded system study, then these very questions try to make a boundary within which that case is to be looked at. The fourth important point is the logic linking the data to the propositions. I said earlier that questions are there. We got to find answer to those questions, and these answers at the moment are theoretical answers. When we collect the data, then those become, let's say, actual answers, quantitative kind of answers, the answers which are supported by the data. Here we are trying to look into the theoretical kind of answers. So theoretically, how do we link these things? Now, once we have the data, then as part of the interpretation, as part of the analysis, we have to link these, let's say, findings with the propositions. So what I'm saying is, it requires pattern matching, explanation building, time series analysis, logic models, and cross-case kind of synthesis. So we anticipate certain kind of data to use the techniques to their full advantage. If some or all propositions cover a temporal sequence, it would require some type of time series analysis. And time series analysis means that what was at time 1, what was at time 2, time 3, time 4. Now these times are again determined by the researcher, keeping in view the questions. So how that change is to be determined, not only determined, but also whether or not this change is a significant change. Now that again has to be decided by the researcher. He has to develop some basis, some criteria, whether he calls this relationship as a significant kind of relationship. Well, in survey analysis, we use the statistics, and there are ways to determine the, let's say, statistical significance level. People talk about the P, or the, let's say, 0.05 kind of level of significance, where people say that the statisticians say that there is a significant relationship, and there are, let's say, 95% chances that this relationship is going to hold, let's say, all the for all the times. So that is one way to do it. But in qualitative research, in case study, possible if we have used the survey as part of the, let's say, triangulation, we could use the same statistical kind of test for determining the significance. If it is not, then perhaps the researcher has to develop some way to determine the relationship between the causes and the effects. If we now, how this relationship is, how strong is this relationship, he may have to do some matching of the different, let's say, findings, and then come up with some kind of conclusions. Make sure that the research design had sufficient procedures to collect time markers as part of the data collection plans with respect to the time series. But also it is recommended, don't collect too much data that were not later used in any analysis, or don't collect too little data that prevented the proper use of the desired analytic technique. If we have too much data, maybe we have spent our time on that and we are not using it, maybe that's a wastage of other resources. A good researcher is very particular that he is not even asking a question unless the answer to this question is to be used somewhere in the data. So I think that's very pertinent. If it is a too little data, well, if it is too little data, probably we haven't done a good job, because too little data will not be sufficient. Too little means it's not sufficient. If we don't have answer to the questions emerging out of the data, then perhaps that study is deficient, that research design is deficient. And if it is deficient, then obviously we may have to redo the whole thing. And if we are redoing the whole things, we are redesigning the whole study. So that will be wastage of the whole, I think, issue. So that is, I think, on the part of the researcher, that he tries to develop a linkage between the research findings and the propositions, and how these research findings are going to help in verifying the hypothesis or the propositions, or how these results are going to answer those questions. And obviously, whether these answers provide us a significant association or not, that researcher has to define, has to determine. This review of literature can be helpful in getting guidance that how the people who did case studies in the past and they tried to develop this kind of linkage, how did they develop, let's say, significance of the association in a qualitative kind of research. So our guidance emerges out of the previous studies as well. Taking lesson from the previous studies, the researcher might have innovative ways of developing inferences or developing, let's say, significance associations between the variables, because in case he has the propositions and those propositions are to be tested. Fifth criteria for interpreting the findings. Case study analysis calls attention to other ways of thinking about a criteria other than what we have talked about, the statistical kind of analysis. In statistical kind of things, as I said, those are very explicit kind of ways of setting up the associations, whereas in qualitative research we do not have explicit, maybe we have to develop our own ways, but certainly it is necessary to come up with certain conclusions. We have to have something about it. So we anticipate and enumerate the important rival explanations. So you will include information about them as part of your data collection. Rival explanations. So we have one explanation. Explanation means we are saying, okay, X is the variable which is producing Y. Can there be other explanations, rival explanations? Okay. So what is the data on those? I think that's important as part of the research design. What could be the possible other explanations? And we have to have data. And then perhaps we can make a comparison. We can do the matching kind of thing and come up with certain conclusions. The complete research design should indicate what data are to be collected, as indicated by the study questions, its propositions and its units of analysis. The design also should tell what is to be done after the data have been collected, as indicated by the logic linking the data to the propositions and the criteria interpreting the findings. That was the fifth step, where I think the researcher has to explain not only what data have been collected. As I said earlier, research design is the total process of the collection of data, its processing, as well as its analysis. So how the data, the case study findings can be fed back to the answers to the questions which were formulated in the beginning. I think these are the 5 steps which are very important for developing a research design for case study approach. But then we also see that we have this research design, same old kind of saying, what is the validity of this, let's say, a research design? So people try to look into the, let's say, quality of the research design. So quality of the research design is basically judged from, let's say, from 4 different angles. So let's talk about the construct validity. The construct validity is something doing with the definition of the variable. What is the meaning of that label which has been given to a phenomenon or a reality? Because how that reality has been constructed. Whatever the label, whatever the name has been given to that phenomenon, how that name, how that label, how that concept, how that variable has been explained, how that has been defined. And when we talk about definition, then perhaps we are talking about theoretical definition as well as operational definition. It doesn't matter whether we are working in the area of qualitative research or quantitative research. These are the basics of research. So since these concepts are the means to communicate something to the reader, Therefore, these concepts should be very clear so that the reader gets the same message what the writer or the researcher is trying to communicate. Therefore, it is very essential that the concept, the construct is explained both literally, theoretically, as well as operationally. Now, operationally, when we talk about that, that means what could be the different dimensions of that variable, what could be the indicators of that, what could be the different elements of a particular, let's say, dimension, and how that variable is going to be measured. That's the construct validity. Now, in many cases, in qualitative researches, we try to bypass and we leave it to the subjective interpretation of the researcher. I think there is a lot of improvement. There is nowadays we try to operationalize these as well. So whatever the meaning is there, that has to be explained. Not only explained, rather this explanation should be in the light of the previous researches, and also maybe the researcher tries to share this kind of operationalization or the explanation of the construct with other colleagues and gets the feedback and tries to improve on that. We know that whatever somebody is defining or saying, that may not be the last word, and that could be changed, that could be modified in view of the, let's say, opinions of others. Others might also be having professional competence who could really give a critique of the whole thing. Now, that's a construct kind of validity. Now, is it a valid kind of construct? What is its meaning? The definition which has been given, is it really what it does? It really indicate what is meant to be indicated? People talk about other kinds of validity, face validity, and things like that. Then the second validity is the internal validity. Now, internal validity, I think it is perhaps more relevant to experimental kind of studies. Now, it implies that within the situation, if we repeat the same, will we get the same results? Well, for experimental studies, yes, I think that's the controlled kind of situation where we are expected to get the same results. In a qualitative research, if we have outlined the methods very specifically, clearly, explicitly, then it is possible, because the operationalization has been delineated, the other factors have been outlined, and anybody who can repeat is likely to come up with the same results. So what is the internal validity of this particular case study? I would say that since it is an in-depth analysis of the case, I think there is a lot of internal validity expected in case of case study, because it is confound, it is bounded, it is an in-depth analysis of the same situation. I think there is likely to be a lot of internal validity. But with respect to the external validity, which has something to do with the generalization, with its application to other situations, it looks that it has limitations. Limitations in the sense that it cannot, the case study which we have studied, or number of cases which we have studied, they may not be representative sample sample of the population about whom we want to make a generalization. So external validity is limited. Of course, theoretically, by building up the argument, we may make a lot of inferences, and our study might contribute to the body of theory, body of knowledge. So it has certain limitations over here. The fourth one is the reliability. Now, reliability means if we are talking about the reliability, we are actually testing the same thing second time, third time, fourth time, and we are trying to see that do we get the same results every time we test it. That's reliability, more like just like reliability of a person, reliability of a friend. So reliability of an instrument, for example. So reliability is an important kind of, I think, aspect of research design. Is this research design, or are the findings of this study reliable? Now, can we repeat this? Reliability could be checked only if we can repeat the same study. The repeatability of the study is possible only if the researcher has laid down all its research design in explicit terms, in black and white, just like as I said earlier, with respect to the operationalization of the things, operationalization of the variables, the instruments being used, and the way data have been analyzed. So reliability can be improved, although I think this is one handicap or one of the criticisms against the qualitative researches, that these are more subjective kind of studies where the researcher defines the concept in his own way. He may not try to put anything in black and white, so we are unable to verify it, unable to repeat. So that is a handicap. But in the case of this case study, I think it doesn't have that much limitation. It can certainly lay down all the criteria for the data collection, all the criteria for making the inferences, all the criteria with respect to connecting the data with the, let's say, propositions, and coming up with the results. So I think replicability is possible in case of case study designs. So we have certain strengths with respect to the case study approach. Lots of I think good things from quantitative researches can be incorporated when we are using the case study design. Certainly, it can have the benefit of triangulation of the methods of research, and with the help of the triangulation of the methods of research, the quality of work is likely to be much better in case we are depending on one method. So research design of the case study is a very comprehensive kind of approach. It has to be looked at from all the possible angles of data collection, and I would suggest that if possible we go for triangulation. I think these are some of the basic ingredients of research design. If we follow these, I think you are going to have a good research design for case study approach. Thank you so much.